Imagine a world painted in shades of gray. A world where every image, every face, every landscape on a screen is just a ghost of its true self. This was the world of early television. A miraculous invention, yes, but an incomplete one. A black and white dream. The entire global technology industry, titans with names like RCA and CBS, poured millions of dollars and the brain power of thousands of engineers into one single, monumental problem. How to put color into that dream. How to transmit the vibrant living world onto a screen. They failed. Year after year, they failed. The problem was considered by many to be a fortress. Impenetrable. Too complex. Too expensive. But for decades, the official story has been a neat, tidy one. A story of American corporate genius. A tale of labs in New Jersey and New York finally cracking the code in the 1950s. That story is a lie. Or, at best, an incomplete truth. Because while the giants of industry wrestled with their complex and failing machines, the solution was being born somewhere else entirely. Not in a multi-million-dollar corporate campus, but in a basement. In a country the world of technology rarely looked at. Mexico. The year was 1934, and the person who would solve the riddle of color television was not a team of seasoned engineers. He was a 17-year-old boy. This is his story. The story of Guillermo Gonzalez Camarena. The story of the true father of color television. A story that the titans of industry fought to sideline and history has tried to forget. To understand the sheer magnitude of what this young man achieved, you have to understand the world he was challenging. The late 1930s. Television was not the ubiquitous appliance it is today. It was a marvel, a piece of magic. But it was a luxury for the rich, a curiosity flickering in bars and department store windows. And it was all black and white. The race for color was the era's equivalent of the space race. It was the ultimate technological prize. In the United States, two colossal forces were locked in a brutal war for dominance. On one side, RCA, led by the formidable David Sarnoff. Sarnoff was a visionary, a ruthless businessman who had built a media empire. He saw color television not just as an invention, but as the future of communication, of entertainment, of profit. He threw everything he had at the problem. His best scientists, his deepest pockets, his entire corporate will. On the other side was CBS, equally determined not to be left behind. Their top engineer, Peter Goldmark, was a genius in his own right, leading another massive effort. The core of the problem was brutally complex. How do you capture, transmit, and then perfectly reconstruct an image made of three primary colors, red, green, and blue, all at the same time? Think about it. Every single frame of video, 30 times per second, had to carry three separate layers of information. These layers had to be perfectly aligned, perfectly balanced, perfectly synchronized. Any error, no matter how small, and the image would collapse into a chaotic, unwatchable mess of bleeding colors and ghostly fringes. RCA's approach was purely electronic. They were trying to develop a system that could broadcast all three color signals simultaneously. It was a nightmare of complexity. It required three separate electron guns in the camera, a massively complicated broadcast signal, and a receiver tube that could somehow juggle all three colors at once. The results were disastrous. Prototypes were enormous. They consumed vast amounts of power. They were notoriously unstable. David Sarnoff, would visit his labs in Princeton, New Jersey, and see the grotesque, flickering images his teams were producing. He was not pleased. The pressure was immense. Millions of dollars were turning into smoke. CBS, meanwhile, was experimenting with a mechanical system, but it was clunky, unreliable, and produced a low-quality image. The consensus in the global engineering community was firm. Color television was at least a decade away, maybe more. The problem, they all agreed, was one of brute force. It required more power, more complex tubes, more sophisticated electronics. They were all looking at the fortress and planning a frontal assault with heavier and heavier cannons. And they were all wrong. They failed to see that the solution was not about more complexity. It was about more elegance. And that elegance would come from a place no one was looking. Let's go to Mexico City, to the childhood of Guillermo Gonzalez Camarena. He was born in Guadalajara in 1917. His family moved to the capital when he was a small boy. From a very early age, it was clear he was different. While other children played with toys, Guillermo played with wires, batteries, and discarded radio parts. His playground was the world of electricity. He was not formally trained as an engineer. He was something more powerful. He was obsessed. He was a voracious reader, devouring any book on electricity and electronics he could get his hands on. At the age of 8, he built his first crystal radio, listening in awe to voices traveling through the air. At 12, he built his first fully functional amateur radio transmitter. By 15, he had earned his radio operator's license. His family's basement became his sanctuary, his laboratory. It was a chaotic kingdom of scavenged parts, homemade tools, and half-finished inventions. To his family, it was a mystery. To Guillermo, it was the entire universe. Then came the moment that would define his life, the inciting incident. In 1934, at the age of 17, Guillermo attended a demonstration of the new technology that was captivating the world: television. He stood in a room and watched as grainy, black and white images flickered to life on a small screen. For everyone else, it was a spectacle. For Guillermo, it was a revelation. But his mind immediately saw not what was there, but what was missing: color. He looked at the ghostly images, and then looked at the vibrant world around him: the deep blue of the sky, the rich green of the trees, the myriad colors of the marketplace. Why, he asked himself, should this miraculous invention only show us a shadow of reality? That question became his obsession. It was not a casual interest. It was a fire that consumed him. He returned to his basement, not as a hobbyist, but as a man with a mission. He would solve the problem of color television. He, a 17-year-old boy, with no funding, no team, and no laboratory beyond a cluttered cellar, would succeed where the world's largest corporations had failed. It was an absurd, almost insane ambition. He began by studying the problem. He read everything about the American efforts. He understood their approach, trying to transmit red, green, and blue all at once. He understood their failure. It's like trying to listen to 3 different songs at the exact same time through one speaker. The result is just noise. The American engineers were trying to build a more complicated speaker. Guillermo asked a different question. What if you didn't play the songs at the same time? What if you played a tiny piece of the first song, then a tiny piece of the second, then a tiny piece of the third, and you did it so fast that the human ear blended them into a harmony? This was the seed of his genius, the revelation, the eureka moment. What if, instead of transmitting the three colors simultaneously, I transmit them one after the other? Red, then green, then blue, in a rapid sequence. He knew from his reading about a phenomenon called persistence of vision. The human eye and brain hold on to an image for a fraction of a second after it's gone. It's the principle that makes movies work. A series of still pictures shown fast enough to look like smooth motion. What if, he thought, I could use that same principle for color? If he could flash a red image, then a green image, then a blue image, fast enough, would the human brain fuse them together into a single, full-color picture? It was a breathtakingly simple, counterintuitive idea. It changed the problem entirely. It was no longer a problem of simultaneous electronic complexity. It was a problem of sequential speed. And this problem, he realized, could be solved not with incredibly complex electronics, but with simple mechanics. He went to work. His solution was the embodiment of elegant ingenuity. He took a standard black and white television camera. In front of the lens, he placed a spinning disc. This disc was not a high-tech piece of equipment. It was a wheel he likely crafted himself. On this disc, he mounted 3 filters: a red filter, a green filter, a blue filter. As the disc spun, it would pass each filter in front of the camera lens in sequence. So the camera, for a fraction of a second, would only see the red part of the scene. Then, it would only see the green part. Then, only the blue part. The camera would transmit these monochrome images, one after another, in a rapid-fire sequence. Red filtered image, green filtered image, blue filtered image. At the receiving end, the television set, he placed an identical, synchronized spinning disc in front of the screen. As the red filtered image was broadcast, the red filter on the receiver's disc would spin into place. When the green filtered image arrived, the green filter would be there, and so on. The system was simple. It was cheap. It was built from junk, from passion, from pure genius. He called it the trichromatic sequential field system. For 2 years, he toiled in his basement, refining the idea. He had to perfect the synchronization of the discs. He had to build the circuitry. He had to do it all himself. Then, in 1939, the moment of truth arrived. He had a working prototype, a homemade camera at one end of the basement, a modified television at the other. He pointed the camera at the most colorful thing he could find. Some accounts say it was a simple bouquet of flowers. Others say he asked his wife to sit for him. He switched on the power. The discs began to whir, spinning into a blur. And on the small black and white screen, something miraculous happened. Color. Flickering. Imperfect, but undeniably there. The flowers, the face of his wife, appeared not as a gray ghost, but in the vibrant hues of life. It was an absolute triumph, a private victory of world-changing significance, witnessed by only a handful of family members in a cellar in Mexico City. The fortress had been breached, not by the armies of RCA, but by a lone teenager with a spinning wheel. He had done it. But before continuing, let me ask you a question. When you hear this, do you think this was an act of bravery or an act of pure madness? To believe, at 17 years old, that you could solve a problem that had stumped the greatest minds and richest corporations on earth. To challenge the system from a basement with nothing but scrap parts and an idea. Bravery or madness? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I read them all very carefully, and if you are appreciating this hidden chapter of technological history, a like on this video would be a tremendous help. It tells the YouTube algorithm that stories like this matter, and it helps the channel reach more people. Your support is invaluable. Now let's continue. González Camarena knew what he had achieved. He was not just a tinkerer, he was a strategist. On August 19th, 1939, at the age of just 22, he filed for his first patent in Mexico. He then knew he had to protect his invention in the place that mattered most, the United States. He traveled to America, a young man with a world-changing idea. On September 15th, 1942, while the world was engulfed in the flames of the Second World War, the United States Patent Office granted him patent number 2,296,019. Let me repeat that. A 25-year-old Mexican inventor now held the American patent for the world's first viable color television system. RCA and CBS were stunned. Who was this kid? Where did he come from? They immediately sent engineers to study his patent. They saw the simplicity, the elegance of his sequential system. CBS, in fact, was so impressed that their own engineer, Peter Goldmark, would later develop a system that was remarkably similar, leading to a massive patent battle that González Camarena ultimately won. He had beaten them, legally, technologically. It was an absolute triumph. But Guillermo González Camarena didn't know that his technical battle was over, and his real battle was just beginning. A battle against forces far more powerful than physics. A battle against money, politics, and the crushing weight of the market. After the war, the television industry exploded. In 1946, González Camarena performed the first public color broadcast in the history of Mexico from his laboratory, XE1GC. The signal was received at the headquarters of the Mexican League of Radio Experimenters. The age of color had begun in Latin America, years before it became a reality in the United States. He became a national hero, a symbol of Mexican ingenuity. In 1952, he took another giant leap, founding his own television station in Mexico City. He was granted a license for Channel 5. Its call sign? XHGC. The GC for González Camarena. This was his station, built on his technology, ready to broadcast his vision to his country. His system was gaining international recognition. It was simple, reliable, and required relatively minor modifications to existing black and white equipment. But in America, the war for the color standard was reaching its brutal climax. RCA had finally developed a workable all-electronic system. It was incredibly complex. It was expensive. The color quality was initially inferior to the sequential systems, but it had one single, overwhelming advantage: backwards compatibility. An NTSC broadcast could be viewed on a new color set in full color, or on an old black and white set in black and white. González Camarena's sequential system, like the competing CBS system, was not compatible. If you broadcast using his method, existing black and white TVS would see nothing but a meaningless scramble. This was the fatal flaw, not of the technology, but of the market. There were already millions of black and white television sets in American homes. RCA argued, powerfully, that to adopt a non-compatible standard would be to make all of those sets instantly obsolete. It would be economic suicide for the industry. It was a corporate war, fought in boardrooms and in the halls of the Federal Communications Commission. RCA, with its immense political and economic power, lobbied relentlessly. In December 1953, the FCC made its decision. It approved the RCA system, known as NTSC, as the mandatory color television standard for the United States. It was a death blow. With the stroke of a pen, the massive American market was closed off to González Camarena's technology forever. And as the American market went, so went the world. The NTSC standard, despite its complexity and cost, became the dominant system in North America and Japan. Europe would later adopt its own standards, PAL and SECAM, but they were also based on the same principles as NTSC. The simple, elegant, mechanical system, born in a Mexican basement, was relegated to a footnote, a what if, a technological dead end. It would seem like a tragic end to the story. The lone genius, crushed by the corporate giant. But that is to misunderstand the man. Guillermo González Camarena was more than just an inventor. His ambition was not simply to get rich or to dominate a market. He was also a composer of folk music, an amateur astronomer who built his own telescopes, a man deeply in love with his country's culture and people. His true dream for color television was not about broadcasting sitcoms. It was about education. He developed a simplified bicolor system specifically for the purpose of creating a nationwide telesecundaria program. His vision was to use the power of television to bring education to the most remote, impoverished villages in Mexico. He wanted to broadcast literacy classes, history lessons, and scientific knowledge in vibrant color, capturing the attention of children who had no access to proper schools. This was his patriotic obsession, to use his genius to lift up his nation. And in a moment of beautiful historical irony, his failed system found its greatest validation in the most technologically advanced endeavor in human history, the Apollo missions. When NASA needed to transmit color video from space and from the moon, what system did they use? They did not use the heavy, complex, power-hungry NTSC cameras. They used a system based on Guillermo González Camarena's sequential color technology. Its simplicity, its reliability, and its low power consumption made it ideal for the harsh environment of space. So when you see those iconic otherworldly color images of astronauts bouncing on the lunar surface, you are seeing the legacy of that boy in the basement in Mexico City. His idea, vindicated on another world. Sadly, Guillermo would not live to see the full impact of his life's work. On April 18, 1965, while returning from inspecting a television transmitter on a mountain in Veracruz, he was killed in a tragic car accident. He was only 48 years old. Mexico mourned the loss of its brightest star. His dream of a national educational television system was left unfinished. His death marked the end of an era. So why does this story matter? Why does it resonate so powerfully even today? Because it is a story that transcends technology. It is a story about the nature of innovation itself. González Camarena proved that true genius is not a matter of resources. It is not about having the biggest budget or the largest team. It is about seeing the world differently. It is about having the courage to ask a simpler question. The corporate giant saw a problem of complexity and tried to solve it with more complexity. He saw a problem of complexity and solved it with elegance. His story is a powerful reminder that groundbreaking ideas can, and often do, come from the margins, from the places the world isn't watching, from the basements and garages of passionate, obsessed individuals who refuse to accept the established limits of what is possible. Today, his legacy endures. In Mexico, Inventor's Day is celebrated on his birthday, February 17th. The television station he founded, XHGC Channel 5, is still one of the most important networks in the country. The foundation he created continues to promote science and technology among young people in Mexico. He is not a forgotten figure. He is a national icon, a permanent symbol of Mexican creativity and resilience. His story was not a failure. It was a profound victory. He may have lost the war of market standards, but he won the more important battle. He proved it could be done. He showed a generation of innovators in Latin America and around the world that they did not have to wait for permission from the great powers to invent the future. They could build it themselves. Every time someone doubts that innovation can emerge from developing nations, every time a young inventor is told their ambition is too grand, Guillermo's ghost is there to prove them wrong. His life is a testament to the idea that the most powerful force in the universe is not money or corporate power. It is a single, brilliant human mind, on fire with an idea. Guillermo Gonzalez Camarena, 1917 to 1965. The boy who found a way to paint the world on a screen.